The rescue mission. The auction house was dark and crowded. The air smelled of sweat, smoke, and fear. Hundreds of people gathered to buy and sell living beings. It was a place where the weak were sold to the strong, a place where freedom had a price. John Carter stood at the back of the crowd, his face hidden under the hood of his jacket. He was not here to buy. He was here to save. A loud voice echoed through the room. Next item for sale. A rare species, young and healthy. Perfect for work or pleasure. The crowd turned their heads as a cage was rolled onto the stage. Inside sat a girl with silver hair and glowing blue eyes. She looked fragile, like a delicate piece of glass, but there was something strange about her. She was calm. Too calm. John's fists clenched. He had seen many slaves before, crying, begging, screaming. But this girl was different. She didn't look afraid. She just sat there, staring at the floor, as if she was waiting for something. The auctioneer began the bidding. Starting price, 10,000 credits. Voices shouted numbers. The price climbed higher and higher. Rich men and powerful warlords fought for her. John didn't care about the price. He raised his hand. 50,000 credits. The crowd gasped. The room fell silent. No one dared to go higher. The auctioneer grinned. Sold. John walked forward and tossed a bag of credits onto the table. The auctioneer nodded to the guards, and they unlocked the cage. The girl stood up slowly. She looked at John with those strange, glowing eyes. "Come with me," John said. She stepped out of the cage, her bare feet touching the cold floor. The guards handed John a small control device. "Press this button if she tries to run," one of them smirked. "It will shock her." John didn't take it. He grabbed the girl's hand and led her through the crowd. People whispered as they passed. Some laughed. Some cursed. "She's not worth that much," someone sneered. "He'll regret it," another muttered. John ignored them. He had no time for fools. As they stepped outside, the cold night air hit them. The girl shivered but said nothing. John led her to his ship, a small but fast freighter named the Eclipse. The ship's doors slid open, and they stepped inside. The girl looked around, her glowing eyes scanning everything. She still had not spoken a word. John took a deep breath. "You're safe now," he said. The girl turned to him. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "No one is safe." John frowned. "What do you mean?" Before she could answer, the ship's alarm beeped. A red warning flashed on the control screen. Incoming transmission. John pressed a button. A holographic image appeared in front of him. It was the auctioneer. His smile was gone. His eyes were serious. "You made a mistake, Carter." John crossed his arms. "I don't think so." The auctioneer chuckled. "You have no idea what you just bought." John glanced at the girl. She stood still, her expression unreadable. "She's just a slave," John said. The auctioneer shook his head. "No, she's something else. And you're not the only one looking for her." Before John could reply, the transmission cut off. Silence filled the ship. John turned to the girl. "Who are you?" The girl finally met his eyes. "I don't remember," she said. John didn't believe her. But right now, it didn't matter. He had saved her, but something told him this was just the beginning. She won't leave his bed. John Carter was used to danger. He had fought in wars, faced space pirates, and survived bounty hunters. But this was new. The girl, who still hadn't told him her name, would not leave his bed. It had been 2 days since he rescued her from the auction house. She had not tried to escape, had not attacked him, had not even asked where they were going. She simply stayed in his bed, curled up under the blankets like a child hiding from monsters. John paced across the ship's small control room, rubbing his temples. He had dealt with all kinds of aliens before, but this was different. She wasn't acting like a normal slave. He had tried to be patient. At first, he thought maybe she was sick. He had checked the ship's medical scanner. Perfectly healthy. Then he thought maybe she was scared. He had assured her she was safe. She only stared at him. Now he was beginning to wonder if there was something more. John took a deep breath and walked towards his private cabin. The door slid open with a soft hiss. She was still there. She sat on the edge of his bed, knees pulled up to her chest, her silver hair falling over her face. The dim light of the cabin made her glowing blue eyes stand out even more. John sighed. He needed answers. He stepped inside and leaned against the wall. "You know," he said, keeping his voice calm, "I don't usually let strangers sleep in my bed." She didn't respond. "Are you planning to stay there forever?" he asked. She finally looked up. Her voice was soft but clear. I don't know where else to go." John frowned. "You can sleep anywhere. This ship has plenty of space, but you stay here. Why?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Because it's safe." John narrowed his eyes. "Safe? From what?" She didn't answer. Something was wrong. John had seen fear before, but this wasn't just fear. It was something deeper, something unnatural. He sat down across from her, keeping his distance. "Listen, I don't know what they did to you back there, but you're free now. No one's coming to hurt you." Her fingers gripped the sheets tightly. "You don't understand. It's not them I'm afraid of." John felt a chill run down his spine. "Then what are you afraid of?" She hesitated, then whispered something so soft he almost didn't hear it. "Me." John's instincts screamed at him. She wasn't lying. She was afraid of herself. Before he could ask more, the ship's alarm blared loudly. "Warning. Unauthorized entry." John jumped to his feet, grabbing his blaster. "Stay here," he ordered. She didn't move. She didn't even react to the alarm. John ran to the control room. His heart pounded as he checked the ship's security feed. The cameras showed nothing. No intruders. No breach. No movement. But the alarm didn't stop. Something was inside the ship. John activated the internal scanners. Still nothing. "Damn it," he muttered. Was it a malfunction? Or something worse? He turned back towards his cabin, only to freeze. The girl was standing in the doorway. He hadn't heard her move. She stared at him, her glowing blue eyes reflecting the red warning lights. "The ship knows," she whispered. John tightened his grip on his blaster. "Knows what?" She stepped forward. "That they're already here." The lights flickered. John's stomach twisted. The air suddenly felt heavier, like something invisible was moving through it. "Who's here?" he demanded. She didn't answer. Instead, she slowly raised her hand and pointed behind him. John spun around, blaster ready. There was nothing there. But for the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't felt since his days in war. Pure, ice-cold fear. The first attack. John Carter didn't scare easily. He had survived too many battles, lost too many friends, and faced too many monsters. But this was different. This was something he couldn't see. Something inside his ship. The alarm still blared, flashing red lights casting eerie shadows across the metal walls. But when he checked the scanners, nothing showed up. No intruders. No life signs. No breach in the hull. Yet the girl, the strange alien he had rescued, stood at his doorway, her glowing blue eyes locked onto something behind him. Something that wasn't there. John gripped his blaster, every muscle in his body tensed. "Who's here?" he demanded. The girl didn't answer. She just kept pointing behind him. John took a slow, steady breath, then turned, blaster raised, and fired. A bright blue energy shot exploded into the darkness, hitting nothing but air. The blast struck the metal wall, leaving a deep burn mark. Silence. Then, a sound. A slow, dragging sound. Like something was crawling across the ceiling. John's blood ran cold. The girl spoke, her voice eerily calm. They're watching. John didn't wait. He slammed his fist against the control panel, sealing the doors to the control room. The security system activated with a low hum, locking every entrance. Nothing was getting in. Nothing was getting out. But the dragging sound didn't stop. John moved to the ship's sensors, adjusting them manually. Something was here. Maybe not in a way his scanners could detect, but he could feel it. A presence thick and heavy in the air, pressing against his skin like static electricity. He turned back to the girl. What the hell is happening? She slowly sat down on the floor, curling her legs beneath her. I told you, she whispered. I was not a prisoner. I was contained. John clenched his jaw. Contained for what? She looked up at him, and for the first time, he saw something in her glowing eyes that made his stomach twist. Regret. I attract them, she said. John didn't like that answer. Who? He pressed. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. The ones who feed on thought. John didn't have time to ask what she meant. Because in that moment, the ship's gravity failed. Everything lurched. John's feet left the ground as the artificial gravity cut out, sending him floating toward the ceiling. Loose objects, tools, cables, weapons spun in the air like debris in open space. And then the lights flickered off. Complete darkness. The alarm died. Silence. And then, a whisper. Not from the girl. Not from John, but from everywhere. Soft. Faint. Impossible to understand. But it was there, echoing through the metal corridors like wind in a dead city. John gritted his teeth. He was a soldier. He didn't believe in ghosts. He didn't believe in curses. But right now, he believed in survival. Stay close, he ordered. He reached out blindly, his fingers brushing against the girl's arm. She didn't flinch. She didn't move. She simply grabbed his wrist, with surprising strength. John reached for the emergency panel, slamming the override. The backup power kicked in. The emergency lights flashed back on. Gravity re-engaged. John and the girl hit the floor hard. John rolled, coming up in a crouch, blaster raised, and froze. The room wasn't empty anymore. Something was standing in the doorway. Tall, thin, its form shifting, flickering like static on a broken screen. It had no face, no eyes, but it was looking at them. The girl inhaled sharply. No. John fired. The energy bolt ripped through the figure and passed right through it. The creature didn't move. It didn't react. It simply glitched, like a hologram struggling to maintain its shape. Then it spoke, not with a voice, but inside John's mind. You should not have taken her. John's vision blurred. His head pounded like someone was driving a spike through his skull. His knees buckled. She belongs to us. John clenched his teeth, forcing himself to stay conscious. His vision swam, but he could still see the girl. She had fallen to her knees, gripping her head, her entire body trembling. She was fighting it, and she was losing. John made a choice. He grabbed the girl, pulling her up, throwing her arm over his shoulder. And then he ran. The truth about Zara. John Carter had been through hell before. War zones, pirate ambushes, even an escape from a black hole. But nothing had prepared him for this. He ran through the dim corridors of his ship, carrying the strange alien girl in his arms. She was barely conscious, her silver hair falling over her face, her breathing ragged. Behind them, the thing followed. Not running, not chasing, just moving. Like a glitch in reality, shifting and flickering, appearing and disappearing between the red emergency lights. Every time it vanished, John felt an unbearable pressure in his skull, as if someone was whispering directly into his mind. She is ours. John growled, forcing himself to ignore the voice. Stay with me, kid, he muttered, glancing down at the girl. She stirred slightly but didn't answer. John reached the engine bay, slamming the door controls. The heavy blast door locked shut behind them. For now, they were safe. John carefully lowered the girl onto a metal crate. "All right," he panted, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. "No more games. No more secrets. Who the hell are you?" The girl's glowing blue eyes fluttered open. She looked up at him, pain in her gaze. I tried to warn you." John narrowed his eyes. "About what?" She swallowed hard. "About them." John's patience was running thin. "You keep saying that. Who are they?" She hesitated. Then, finally, she spoke. "They are the Varith." John had never heard that name before, but something about it felt wrong. "They are not creatures," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "They are a presence, a force. They do not live like we do. They exist between minds. They feed on thoughts, on memories, on fear." John's stomach twisted. "Are you saying that thing out there is inside my head?" She nodded. "They do not have physical bodies. They only take shape when they find someone to anchor them." John clenched his jaw. "And let me guess, you're the anchor." Her silence was enough of an answer. John ran a hand through his hair, frustration boiling over. "Damn it. Why didn't you tell me this before I rescued you?" She flinched at his tone. "Because I thought I could escape them." She looked down, guilt in her expression. "But I was wrong." John exhaled sharply. He wanted to be angry. He wanted to yell. But looking at her now, at the way she hugged herself as if trying to keep from breaking apart, he couldn't. She wasn't a monster. She was just a kid running from something she couldn't fight. John crouched in front of her, forcing his voice to be calm. "All right. No more secrets. What exactly are you?" She hesitated. Then she pulled up the sleeve of her thin dress, revealing something that made John's breath catch. A tattoo. No, not a tattoo. A mark. It was glowing faintly, pulsing in sync with the lights of the ship. A complex web of symbols, spiraling across her skin like circuitry. "I was created," she said softly. John stiffened. "Created?" She nodded. "Not born. Designed." She traced the glowing symbols on her arm. "I am not just an alien. I am a living beacon." John didn't like where this was going. A beacon for what? She met his eyes, and for the first time, he saw true terror in her expression. "For them," she whispered. John's blood went cold. His ship, his safe haven, his home. It wasn't just under attack. It was a lighthouse, guiding something far worse straight to them. Before he could react, the ship shook violently. The emergency lights exploded in a shower of sparks. The whispering returned, louder, sharper, like 1,000 voices speaking at once. "You cannot run, John Carter. She belongs to us." John grabbed Zura's hand. "No, she belongs to herself." He pulled out his blaster, heart pounding. "We're getting off this ship." Zura's eyes widened. "What?" John activated the control panel, pulling up the schematics. "I've got an escape pod docked on the lower deck. If we can make it there, we can." He stopped, because the escape pod was gone. John's stomach dropped. He turned to Zura. They already knew. Her face was pale. They always know. The whispering grew deafening. Then the walls began to dissolve. Not break, not shatter. Dissolve. The metal structure of the ship faded into darkness, replaced by nothingness, like reality itself was being erased. John held Zura close, shielding her. "Damn it. Think, Carter. Think." Then, an idea hit him. If the Varith existed inside minds, then maybe he could fight them the same way. He looked down at Zura. "You said they feed on thought, right?" She nodded. "Yes." John smirked. "Then let's give them something they can't digest." Zura frowned. "What do you mean?" John raised his blaster, aiming at the ship's power core. "We're going to blow their damn meal to hell." Zura's eyes widened. "You're insane." John grinned. "Welcome to the club, kid." He pulled the trigger. A massive explosion erupted, engulfing them in fire and light. And then everything went black. The bounty hunters. The explosion should have killed them. John Carter knew that. But instead of the fiery death he expected, there was silence. Then a breath. His own breath. John's eyes snapped open. He was lying on something cold. Metal. His vision blurred, adjusting to the dim light around him. He wasn't in his ship anymore. Where the hell was he? He pushed himself up, his head throbbing like a hammer against steel. His surroundings came into focus. A dark, confined space. A cell. Metal walls. A single flickering light above. A reinforced energy barrier humming softly at the entrance. Great. Captured. John exhaled sharply, his survival instincts kicking in. First things first, assess the situation. He patted himself down. No weapons. No gear. They had stripped him clean. His heart clenched. Zyra. Where was she? He turned, scanning the room. And there, curled up in the corner of the cell, was the silver-haired alien girl. She looked unharmed, but something was wrong. She wasn't moving. Zyra. John rushed to her side, shaking her gently. Nothing. She was breathing, but her body was limp, her glowing blue eyes half open but unfocused, like she wasn't really there. John's gut twisted. Hey, kid, wake up. We don't have time for this. Still nothing. Before he could panic, a voice crackled through the intercom. Carter, you really don't know when to quit, do you? John froze. He knew that voice. Slowly, he turned toward the energy barrier. Outside the cell, standing with a smug grin, was Varric Kane, a bounty hunter, a damn good one, and not someone John wanted to see right now. Varric was tall, lean, and mean as hell, scar running down his jaw, cybernetic eye glowing red, a long rifle slung across his back. John scowled. Varric, if I wasn't locked in here, I'd punch that ugly face of yours. Varric chuckled. Still got that sharp tongue, I see. He folded his arms. You've made a real mess of things, Carter. John gestured around. Yeah, and where the hell are we? Varric smirked. Welcome to my ship, the Black Talon. John's stomach dropped. The Black Talon, a legendary bounty ship. If you ended up here, you weren't getting out. John kept his expression calm. What do you want? Varric shrugged. Not much, just the girl. John's fists clenched. She's not for sale. Varric laughed. That's the thing, Carter. She already has a buyer. John's jaw tightened. Who? Varric's grin widened. Let's just say, the highest bidder. John cursed under his breath. He should have known. Zyra wasn't just any slave. She was a living beacon, a magnet for the Varith. And now, the worst people in the galaxy wanted her. John needed to think. Fast. Zyra was still unresponsive. The Varith's influence was messing with her mind. If he didn't get her out of here soon, she wouldn't survive. John looked up at Varric, forcing a cocky smirk. All right, fine. You win. But before you sell me off, can I at least get a drink? You know, one last toast before you hand me over. Varric rolled his eyes. Nice try, Carter. I know that trick. John sighed. Fine, but can I at least know how much I'm worth these days? Varric chuckled. You? Not much. The girl. Priceless. John's mind raced. Varric was a bounty hunter, which meant his ship had a weapons locker. John just needed one chance. A distraction. Something. Then it hit him. Zyra was a telepath. If she could just wake up, she called. His thoughts were interrupted by a deep rumble. The ship shook. The lights flickered. Varric's expression darkened. What the hell? John smirked. Oh, buddy, you really should have done your research. Varric frowned. What? The entire ship lurched violently. Then, the alarms blared. Warning. Unauthorized ENTROEDTECTED. John's grin widened. They're here. Varric's eyes widened. Who? John pointed at Zira. The people who really own her. The bounty hunter barely had time to react before the ship shook again, harder this time. Something was coming. John took his chance. With a quick, calculated move, he lunged forward, slamming his fist into Varric's cybernetic eye. The bounty hunter stumbled back, cursing. John didn't hesitate. He grabbed the stun baton from Varric's belt and jabbed it straight into the energy barrier's control panel. The barrier short-circuited. The door snapped open. John wasted no time. He grabbed Zira, slinging her over his shoulder. She was still weak, but he could feel her stirring. "Come on, kid," he muttered. "Wake up." But there was no time to wait. The Varith were coming. The real monsters. John sprinted down the hallway as the black talon trembled around him. The ship's security guards rushed in, but John moved fast. A stolen blaster in one hand, Zira in the other, he fought his way through. One goal: get to the hangar, steal a ship, escape. But as he turned a corner, a massive force slammed into him, sending him crashing into the wall. Pain shot through his ribs. He groaned, trying to get up, only to see a shadow standing over him. A new figure, dressed in black armor, helmet covering their face. A voice, deep, synthetic. "You cannot run, John Carter." John's stomach twisted, because he recognized that voice. It wasn't Varric. It wasn't a bounty hunter. It was something else. Something not human. The Varith had taken form, and they had come to claim Zira. The escape plan. John Carter had seen death before. He had fought in wars, escaped from bounty hunters, and survived impossible odds. But this was different. The figure standing before him was not human. It wore armor, black as the void, smooth and featureless. No eyes, no mouth, just darkness, shifting unnaturally, like a shadow trying to take shape. And when it spoke, its voice wasn't a sound. It was a whisper inside his head. "She belongs to us, John Carter." John gritted his teeth, pulling Zira closer. She was still weak, her glowing blue eyes flickering with barely contained fear. He raised his stolen blaster, aiming at the figure's head. "Yeah. Well, I'm bad at sharing." He pulled the trigger. The energy bolt ripped through the figure's chest and passed straight through. John's breath caught. The thing didn't flinch, didn't react. It just tilted its head, like it was curious. John fired again. 3 shots. Nothing. No impact. No burn marks. The figure simply absorbed the shots like smoke. Zira's weak voice broke the silence. "You can't kill them that way." John cursed. "Yeah. Any bright ideas, kid?" Her fingers twitched against his arm. "We have to leave. Now." John didn't argue. He grabbed Zira's wrist and ran. The hangar bay. A race against time. The halls of the Black Talon shook violently as John sprinted through them. Something was happening. Not just the usual chaos of an enemy ship under attack. This was worse. The air felt wrong. Heavy. Electric. Like the very fabric of reality was twisting around them. John's instincts screamed at him. They were running out of time. He turned a corner, nearly colliding with a pair of bounty hunters. "Stop him," one shouted, raising a rifle. John didn't break stride. He dropped low, grabbing a fallen stun baton from the floor, and slammed it into the first hunter's leg. The man collapsed with a scream. John spun, kicked the second hunter's weapon aside, and elbowed him in the jaw. The bounty hunter staggered, groaning, and then suddenly froze. John blinked. The man's eyes turned completely black. A strange gurgling noise came from his throat, and then his body began to convulse. John yanked Zira back. "What the hell?" The bounty hunter collapsed into ash. John's grip tightened around Zira. Tell me that's not normal. She swallowed. It's them. They're spreading. John cursed under his breath. He needed a ship. Now. They burst into the hangar bay. Rows of sleek starfighters and cargo ships lined the metal floor, engines glowing softly. John's eyes locked onto a small interceptor ship at the far end. Fast, compact, heavily armored. Perfect. But there was a problem. A dozen bounty hunters were already there, armed, waiting. And behind them, Varric Kane. A desperate gamble. Varric stood in front of the interceptor, arms crossed, that same damned smirk on his face. Carter, Carter, Carter. He shook his head. You just don't know when to quit. John exhaled sharply. Varric, I'm really not in the mood right now. Varric chuckled. Oh, I can see that. He gestured around. You've got something real nasty chasing you. I should let them have you. John's grip on Zira tightened. Then do it. Varric's smirk faded. Nah, too easy. I'd rather sell you both and make a fortune. John tensed. He needed to think. Zira whispered. They're close. John glanced around. The walls of the hangar were darkening. Not from shadows, from something else. The Varith. They were here. John only had seconds. His mind raced. Fighting wasn't an option. Talking wouldn't work. That left one insane idea. John took a deep breath. Then he raised his hands. I surrender. Varric blinked. What? John nodded. You win. You take the girl, take the bounty. Whatever. Just call off your men and let me breathe for a second. Varric frowned, suspicious. You're not that kind of guy, Carter. John shrugged. Maybe I'd finally learn my lesson. Varric narrowed his eyes. But then he smirked. All right. Drop your weapon. John did. The stolen blaster hit the floor with a clang. Varric gestured to one of his men. Take the girl. Zira tensed. John squeezed her hand slightly, a silent message. Wait. The bounty hunter stepped forward, reaching for Zira. John moved. With a sudden, brutal kick, he smashed the blaster on the floor, triggering an explosion. The room erupted in chaos. Smoke, fire, screams. John grabbed Zira and sprinted for the interceptor. The bounty hunters scrambled, blinded by the blast. John leaped onto the ramp, hitting the door controls. Go, go, go. Zira stumbled in after him. Varric roared in anger, raising his rifle. John slammed the cockpit controls. The ship's shields activated. Just as Varric fired, energy rounds bounced off the hull. The interceptor's engines roared to life. John gripped the controls, his fingers flying over the dashboard. Hold on, kid. Zira barely had time to grab a seat as John slammed the thrusters forward. The ship shot out of the hangar like a bullet. Behind them, the black talon shook violently, the Varith consuming it from the inside. John didn't look back. He just kept flying. Silence among the stars. Minutes passed. The interceptor drifted through deep space. Safe. For now. John exhaled, running a hand through his hair. That was stupid. Zira stared at him. You saved me. John gave a dry chuckle. Yeah, well, it's a bad habit. She hesitated. Then, for the first time, she smiled. It was small, faint, but real. John leaned back in his seat. So, where do we go now? Zira's smile faded. She looked out at the endless void. There's only one place left. John frowned. And where's that? She turned to him. The place where this all started. John didn't like the sound of that. But he nodded. All right, kid. You lead the way. And with that, they disappeared into the void. The final choice. John Carter had seen many strange things in his life. Alien wars, rogue AI, bounty hunters with no sense of humor. But this was something else. The ship's navigation screen flickered as Zira input coordinates manually. A place that shouldn't exist. A system wiped from every galactic map. A location that even bounty hunters feared. And yet she knew exactly where to go. John crossed his arms, watching her closely. You mind telling me what's waiting for us out there? Zura's glowing blue eyes met his. The end. John sighed. Of what? She hesitated, then whispered, of everything. John didn't like that answer. But at this point, he was out of options. The ship's engines hummed as the stars stretched into streaks of light. And they vanished into hyperspace. The forgotten world. When the ship dropped out of hyperspace, John's breath caught. They weren't in empty space anymore. They were above a dead planet. A massive, shattered world floating in the abyss. The surface was cracked, as if some ancient war had torn it apart. Massive ruins stretched across the land, glowing faintly with eerie blue energy. And at the center, a monolithic structure stood, reaching high into the sky. A temple. John's instincts screamed at him. This place, he muttered. What the hell is it? Zura closed her eyes. It's where I was created. John turned sharply toward her. You're saying this is your home? She shook her head. No, it's my prison. John's stomach twisted. Zura took a shaky breath. The Varith didn't just find me, John. They made me. John's fists clenched. You're saying those things built you? She nodded. Not in a lab. Not with machines. They shaped me from thought. From memory. They gave me form. A mind, but I was never meant to escape. John exhaled sharply. Then why did they let you go? Zura looked down. Because I was their final experiment. John stepped forward. Explain. She took a deep breath. The Varith don't have bodies. They don't exist in a way that normal life does. They exist inside minds. They need a host, a connection, to survive. She placed a hand on her chest. They made me as the first of their kind to walk freely. A Varith with a permanent body, a host that never fades. John's blood ran cold. You mean to tell me? He took a step back. You're one of them. Zura's eyes dimmed. Not yet. John stared at her. What do you mean, not yet? She swallowed hard. They're waiting, John. Watching. They created me as a bridge to open the gate between their world and ours. John felt like his skull was splitting open. The entire galaxy, he whispered. You're saying they want to take over every mind in existence. Zura nodded. And the only way to stop it, she glanced at the temple, is for me to go back. John froze. No. Zura's eyes softened. Joan. No. He shook his head. That's not happening. I didn't drag you halfway across the galaxy just to throw you back into their hands. Zura stepped closer. John, if I don't. We'll find another way. John snapped. We always do. She flinched at the anger in his voice. But John wasn't angry at her. He was angry at himself. Because deep down he knew. There was no other way. The final choice. John paced the cockpit, his mind racing. There had to be a solution. A trick. A gamble. But every outcome was the same. If Zura stayed, the Varith would never stop coming. If she left, the connection would be severed. They would lose her forever. John turned back to Zura. There's gotta be another way, kid. There's always another way. She smiled sadly. There isn't. John clenched his fists. Damn it, Zura. You're a person, not a weapon. You deserve a life. She reached up, placing a gentle hand against his cheek. I have one. John swallowed hard. Then why do you have to throw it away? Zura's glowing eyes shimmered. Because if I don't, you won't have one. Silence. John's hands trembled. He had never been afraid of losing someone before. Not like this. Zura turned toward the exit ramp. She took a deep breath, then started walking. John's body moved before his mind could stop it. Zura, wait. She paused. John exhaled. Then, in a low voice, he said, "You're not doing this alone." Zyra turned, eyes wide. "Joan." He smirked. "You think I'm just gonna let you march into some ancient nightmare by yourself?" He cracked his knuckles. "Not a chance." Her lips parted. "But if you come with me, they'll—" "I don't care." Zyra's breath hitched. John stepped forward. "You're not just some experiment. You're my friend. And I don't leave my friends behind." Tears welled in Zyra's eyes. Then, for the first time since they met, she hugged him. John froze for a second. Then, slowly, he hugged her back. No words. Just understanding. Then, Zyra pulled away. She wiped her eyes, steeling herself. "All right." John grinned. "All right." Together, they stepped onto the ramp. The temple loomed before them. The Varith were waiting. But this time, they weren't walking into the dark alone. And whatever happened next, they would face it together.